Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Bourgogne because I've been having a great time in this ship recently. Bourgogne has long been my go-to recommendation for steel battleships. And even in 2025, where we're seeing some interesting power creep, let's say, I still think this ship is absolutely amazing. You get this ship in the right position on a flank, finding broadsides. There's not much that can compete with a Bourgogne. This ship being essentially an up-tiered Alsace, just with a reload booster, an amazing engine boost, better dispersion. It is really, really fun. This reload booster here really comes in clutch just to upgrade your consistency. But Bourgogne will struggle in games where people are angling to you. This ship is all about creativity and finding those broadsides. And that's, I think, why I love it so much. It really feels like it rewards positioning incredibly well and actually punishes you for positioning poorly with worse damage output, and more importantly, it dies rather quickly. This ship does not have that much HP. I mean, it's nearly 80k, which is still fine for tier 10, don't get me wrong. But 32 millimeters of armor everywhere means a lot of people can farm you down rather quickly, whether that be all the 32 mil overmatch we're seeing with the super ships tier, but also a lot of HE these days. Secondaries, Libertads, for example. What do you do against those? So Bourgogne, while very strong, certainly does have some weaknesses, and I'm just really, really enjoying it. So here in this game, we have ourselves some arms race. We're going to get some nice buffs, but I'm also running the Special Commander for the French, which, if you get a Dev Strike, buffs your reload by 5%. And you can actually stack that if you get multiple Dev Strikes. Bourgogne, with its reload booster, can sometimes activate that. We may or may not see that in the second game. I got 3 really good games to show you today. I'm using HE, finally. I've talked about this in the past, where I often am a little too greedy to just shoot armor piercing, wanting to find those broadside Dev Strikes, and perhaps not being willing enough to switch to the HE. It's really important that you do, though. Bourgogne is at its best when you're swapping ammo type for whatever situation you are in. We're not getting the best hits on this Ohio, but you can certainly do upwards of 7, 8, 10,000 HE damage alongside getting yourself some fires, which is really good. And if you run things like Expert Loader, Gun Feeder, whatever it's called, it's not too punishing to actually be swapping to the correct ammo type for the situation. Checking out the submarine torps here, because I don't have them memorized as far as their distances go. And we're just going to push away from them, so don't even have to worry about those torpedoes coming in for us. Ohio, at nearly 20 kilometers, can still take a citadel. That is the special sauce here with Bourgogne. Yes, you only get 380s. Very little overmatch. But they have a lot of pen still. That's one of the unique features of a lot of French guns, at least at higher tier. You have a pretty good shell velocity, but more importantly, for their caliber, they have really high pen. So even in Ohio there, we can get ourselves some citadels. Not often, though. That is a bit of RNG. What is less RNG dependent is a broadside Stalingrad. Pop our reload booster instantly, but look at that dispersion there. That clump was always going to get a Death Strike. And with that commander, a further 5% reload buff. You love to see it. Yoshino from earlier on, and he's going broadside. Maybe not expecting us to be fully reloaded yet. A battleship that can reload this quickly, temporarily, is very, very fun. Nearly finishing him off. Already up to 168,000 damage into this one in 5.5 minutes. Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of this ship, guys. Even though it's not going to be the best in all situations, there's certainly going to be times where you're locked out of games where you're not finding these broadsides. But when you do, it is just so much fun. Unfortunately, it is for steel. So for those of you that haven't got a lot of steel, there's not a lot that really can replicate this playstyle. Bourgogne is very unique in this game. AP into the destroyer, also no problem. Poor Shima there. Probably was going to go down anyway. There's a Hergamo firing at him, but still, incredible damage output on this ship. And I'm going to make a mistake here towards the end of this game, and that is not popping my reload booster on cooldown. That is another mistake I make. I'm a little too greedy for those dev strikes, so I'm very hesitant to swap to HE. That's one of them. But the other one is again coming down to wanting to save those reload boosters. I really should be sending them on cooldown, especially in games like this, which are certainly looking more like a blowout, unfortunately. We need that extra DPM. Otherwise, we're just leaving it on the table, just saying no to extra damage we otherwise could be having. Finally swapping to the HE here, we do not overmatch the Yoshino in most areas, so getting over to the HE could be a good idea, but also to maybe shoot at this Ohio here. But Yoshino looks like he's turning, and the HE can still do some relatively good damage. It's a fun ship. If you don't have this one, maybe there's some Jean Bart you could buy on the Black Friday sales. That's a little further away, but you get that for around 16,000 doubloons, I believe. For a tier 9, you know, that's not bad, especially since we've seen Gonzaga go on sale here for over 34, nearly 35,000 doubloons for a tier 9. Yeah, Wargaming's pricing model is certainly shifting, I gotta say. A little power creep in-game as far as power level of ships, experimental ships. Perhaps some creep on the pricing of things as well. But that is our first game. Got a couple more for you here, though. But a wonderful experience getting ourselves 9 Citadels already. You'll love to see that. Anytime you can play Bourgogne and you have more Citadels than Fires, you know you've had a really, really good time. Now, you may have noticed I played that one a little bit passive. Certainly, that was down to the submarine being on our flank, and, well, you don't really want to push into those. This game, though, we're going to be much, much more aggressive, especially once we realize where the submarine goes. I'm still going to play a little bit more passive, but you notice I've popped my engine boost on spawn. That's because we spawned way off on the flank on this map, and you can sometimes get in some very nice opportune shots if you get to the flank really early. People may not be expecting it. And maybe that's the other benefit of Bourgogne over some of the other French ships that we've seen is 15% engine boost here, where Repub only gets 8%. That's one of the main features of this ship, feeling much more nimble. Look at that dispersion, though. That's unlocked dispersion, by the way. Poor G-Nan. Dev Strike First Blood. We'll take our reload buff to start things off. That is unlocked dispersion, though. I don't understand how that was so accurate, to be honest with you. And we're going to see some locked on dispersion at closer range actually be quite a bit worse. Maybe my main frustration, or one of my main frustrations when playing this game, is just how inconsistently you get good dispersion and not. That G-Nan did not deserve to die. That's not controversial, I hope. He should not have taken that nearly that much damage. I was late on my shot. I didn't get the reload in time for locked on dispersion. That blind fire should never have been that accurate. But we're about to see us push into a cap where there's going to be some more light cruisers around. And this time, I have HE loaded. I wasn't expecting that Smolensk there. I was hoping the Hurricane might get lit. So we're going to swap over to the AP and then pop reload booster. This is the other thing about Bourgogne, allowing you to get some of these shots in time. But broadside Smolensk, 8 kilometers? That's worse dispersion. Sure, we still got 1 Citadel, which is nice. I'm not going to complain too much, although I would prefer the Dev Strike be there than on the G-Nan. And then unlocked, because he goes dark, and again we get better dispersion. Why? Why? I don't understand. It feels like maybe that's a bug. Maybe when you're locked onto someone who goes dark, maybe there's some time there, like upwards of 2 or 3 seconds where you retain lock-on, and maybe it's even better than normal lock-on. I don't understand, to be honest with you, but it's a little frustrating. Smolensk does angle, though, turns away from our shot, so we missed that last one. Fortunately, our teammates do manage to finish him off. Still a great start to this game, but some frustrations over the inconsistency on dispersion. That's for all battleships, obviously. That is one of the downsides. Yes, you have massive firepower. It could not be balanced if it was perfectly accurate. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm just hoping that we see a little more consistency when they're stationary flat broadside compared to when they're at longer ranges and undetected, perhaps. But with Bourgogne, we have less of an issue with that thanks to this reload booster. If you've ever played something like Vermont, or even just a more standard battleship like Montana, which I had some excellent experiences in recently as well. Definitely go check out that video from last week, I believe. You have a 30-second or a 40-second reload. That means you got to sit there and wait, thinking about that really unfortunate salvo for quite some time. Bourgogne can just pop this reload booster when it's available and get back to some really, really good salvos rather quickly. And that's what I love so much about playing Bourgogne. You have some of the more Battleship feeling on a battle cruiser type experience. I really don't enjoy battle cruisers quite as much, as you guys know, but Bourgogne brings enough of that Battleship firepower with some of the consistency we're going to get out of battle cruisers, and I really like it a lot more. Unfortunately, we don't get the overmatched citadels on defense. If you didn't know, that ship has a very vulnerable citadel, but also an overmatchable bow. It's 25 millimeters. Second salvo, though, yes, sir, we do complete the double dev strike within the first 6 minutes. So now we have a 10% better reload for the rest of the game. Not even arms race. Feels pretty good, I gotta say. This is also time that I should point out where that enemy sub is. He was in the B cap. He was spotted there actually a long time ago now, so we should be a little bit careful, but that's why I was able to play more aggressive. Vermont salvo does not do as much to us as we do to him. And again, we have that reload booster here. He's not actually going to angle quite enough here, at least initially, so we're gonna get another salvo through his bow and get another citadel. Massive damage racked up already, getting ourselves 10 citadels quite early on. But now I think he's a little bit too angled. I'm also reversing towards him, cutting off that angle further, so I'll just get another 12,000 into his superstructure. The burst potential is incredible. Now, I did get very fortunate. Bourgogne, alongside a lot of these French battleships, do get some built-in black hole armor. They got sort of a turtleback, not as good as German turtleback, but better in some ways because it seems to function as a black hole where shells just go to disappear. But if he had aimed correctly for the cheek citadel, which is actually possible on some of these French ships, which I'll show you at the end of this video when we look at the armor viewer, but it's possible to actually get some cheek salvos into and citadels into these ships, which I was vulnerable to there. Vermont could have dev struck me there. Some RNG involved, certainly, but certainly something to watch out for if you're playing these ships and angling at really, really close range. Now at this point in the game, we're just left with the long-range cleanup, of course. Bourgogne does okay here, but you're going to notice some of the dispersion inconsistencies, and this is less about lock-on or bugs or anything like that. Bourgogne just does not have the sigma or dispersion parameters like some of the most accurate tier 10 battleships, which means probably HE is a little better at these longer ranges. As much as I hate to admit it, HE Bourgogne is probably the best way to guarantee high damage numbers consistently. I really do prefer these games where I can get the citadels, though. This is where I have the most fun with the Bourgogne. But again, swapping to HE, trying to do a little better job of that, especially because there's an enemy sub in front of us. In the late game, sometimes, like this, they have run out of that battery charge, so they have to surface. And HE does splash damage, where AP you kind of have to directly hit. It's a lot harder, so really, really incentivizing you to swap to HE. So on a ship like Bourgogne, where we're already building for the shell swaps, it's really, really good to have against some of those submarines. We also have decent ASW range, pretty standard at this point. I'm not a huge fan of subs in this game, as you guys know, but we're not going to get into that here. Just worth noting that when you're swapping to HE or shooting HE, more HE at these longer ranges, you're also doing a little better against those submarines. Using our reload booster here again, late game, learning from my mistakes in the first game I had to show for you. Still not getting the best damage out of our armor piercing at these longer ranges, but it's a little more damage, right? It's a little bit more damage. We do eat a torpedo, unfortunately. Kind of forgot there was a destroyer left alive anyway. But look at this reload that we have here now. With that double reload buff, we have like a 21-second reload. Sorry, 20-second reload. That AR actually buffed us up even a little bit further. That's without arms race. Bourgogne is just absolutely hilarious. I did bring up Jean Bart already as far as like a tier 9 example of this, and I think it's not quite as good as Bourgogne. For someone like me, I enjoy the maneuverability characteristics of Bourgogne and some of the consistency you gain out of the extra full gun turret, where Jean Bart can still be quite fun, but It's not as fast. The engine boost isn't as good. It's not as tanky, I would say, just simply because it's not as quick, able to dodge, that kind of thing. I don't personally have as much fun with it. Although last Black Friday, I had a really good time with it. So maybe I'm warming up to some Jean Bart. But if you're interested in this playstyle and you know you're not really getting that much steel to grind out a tier 10 steel ship, I think Jean Bart's an interesting thing to look at in November if they bring it back for Black Friday. I sure hope they do. That would be really sad. I'm always a little wary about talking about some of these Black Friday only ships when we're so far away from that event. But I really hope they don't go down that route of completely removing them from that event. That would be really, really sad. And Black Friday, always good time to buy ships if you're thinking about spending money on this game. January, February, even into March here, we're seeing Wargaming be, well, ramping the cost by a lot. Some of the gambling events. Fortunately, there's an Admiral pack at least for this most recent Gonzaga ship, but Wargaming's changing this year, man. This is a bit of a dramatic shift, I gotta say. So I would be concerned going into the holiday later portion of 2025 where we find Black Friday, Christmas time, we see the 50% off premium. Is that going to show up? I don't know. I'm worried about the direction Wargaming is going in. That said, though, they have changed their mind in the past. Does feel a little bit like we got to grab those pitchforks from time to time, but they did change their mind when it came to classified documents. They have been buffing ships that are older, right? Every once in a while, like September and in January also, we got some balance changes that included buffs and that to some older ships in this game that are welcome, honestly. Really, really good to see that kind of thing. So maybe this is just a small blip, I don't know. But the trend here going into 2025 here feels tough. It feels like they are ramping up this paid content, the power creep. We're seeing those experimental ships be kind of insane. Wargaming could do a lot of goodwill, gain a lot of goodwill by admitting a bit of a mistake there with the experimental ships and perhaps removing them from randoms and certainly from ranked game modes. I'm not someone who plays a lot of ranked these days, but perhaps I should. Perhaps I should dive in there to see what it's like playing Tier 9 ranked against Los Andes and Viasma Spam. Those of you that do play can let me know how fun that is or how not so fun that is. We're also going into a period of another carrier rework. It's a little concerning how intermittent Wargaming responds and listens to the community feedback, especially given that carriers are such a massive problem. I'm a little bit worried about that, I gotta say, just given how the past has gone. But this video is about Bourgogne, so let's get back to that and not go over all my worries and concerns about the direction of this game. Some nice citadels into this Tianjin here. Very vulnerable citadel, of course. It's based on a Riga. And we use our reload booster, getting that consistency, right? Wrong. Not always, right? You're going to get situations like that where shells go short, you get some sort of bad dispersion there, and we do only get the overpens. But in general, one of your salvos from your reload booster should be relatively consistent. You'll notice my positioning here, trying to use island cover to not always get shot at, to avoid the Libertad, for example. It's a ship that really likes to play at mid ranges, not purely close range, because again, you're going to die rather quickly. But if you can play 15 kilometers, 10 to 15 kilometers away from the enemy, that's where I've found Bourgogne really has some incredible games. You will face scenarios where that isn't going to work. Obviously, against carriers, you're going to have a bad time. Submarines also pushing into that, getting caught by those, you're going to have a bad time. So playing a little more passive to start is probably the right way to go. But timing your pushes in some of these later game scenarios can net you quite good results. And with this speed boost, with this extra speed from Brisk, for example, on this build, you're going to get into good positions on this ship. Even if you realize a little bit late, this is a fast battleship at tier 10. Maybe not quite the fastest these days, but it is up there. It's second or third, I think. Some of the higher tier battleships have gotten pretty quick these days, but Bourgogne still has a lot of speed to offer. Tianjin again going broadside. This time we do manage to finish him off. And broadside onto Ruprecht front guns. And he gets a good salvo into us. So black hole armor saving us probably from citadels, but still not guaranteeing we take no damage. One of the other things that will really set apart something like the Bourgogne, or really a lot of these higher tier French battleships, is that the turtleback rises really high above the water. It's protected by some, I think, 32 mil plating, torp protection, which makes you think, oh, this is really vulnerable to HE all across its broadside. But reality is more than halfway up, I think, on the belt armor is just going to be shatters because you're hitting torp protection and then it's protected by that turtleback armor, at least the outer turtleback armor. And the 32 millimeter deck armor, upper belt armor that you can get through, that it is really squishy, is actually a lot higher up on the ship than you would think. And that can lead to the ship feeling a lot harder to do damage to if you're a really strong HE spammer ship and it's maybe closer ranges, you're getting less of that plunging fire perhaps. Ruprecht goes down, NC goes down, and we get ourselves another 7 Citadel game. I had so much fun playing these games, I gotta say. Intermittently sprinkling in some Bourgogne into my sessions has been an absolute blast. It's still a battleship, still hits like a battleship, but it's more maneuverable and really, really fun to play. And it's kind of strange, really, actually, how much I like Bourgogne and how much I don't enjoy playing Repub that much. I don't know why that is, to be honest with you. They seem rather similar, both having really fast reloads. Bourgogne just feels better to me for whatever reason. I think it might come down to just having a slight edge in base speed here. It's only like 2 knots or so. If I took speed flags off, I think it's 30 and 32. But the engine boost being stronger at 15% instead of 8%, and the reload booster, I think just pushes it over the edge for me. Also, a little better rudder shift, turning radius, that kind of thing on Bourgogne relative to Repub, a little better concealment. It feels much more nimble and effective because of that, at least for me. You do lack overmatch, sure, but man, I love playing Bourgogne, so I'm pretty happy to have had 3 incredible games to show you today. 32 mil everywhere. This is what I mean, right? You get this side plating of 32 mil. It's torp protection though. So it's protected by this armor belt, and any HE shells are just going to shatter on that and do no damage. So you gotta aim quite a bit higher than you think on this ship. But to look at the cheek here, this is the important bit. Into the Citadel, you can actually hit this at an angle of 30, 35-ish degrees. Even if you don't have 32 mil overmatch, this is what you can get through. That's how I actually Citadel'd the Vermont on the 2nd salvo, I believe. You can do this on a lot of different ships when the angle is good enough that the 32 mil isn't going to auto mounts, but the bow of the Citadel or even this little cheek portion is showing. And it's risky to go for, maybe more RNG dependent, but at closer ranges you can get it a lot of the time. Maybe not guaranteed, but you can get it a lot of the time. And same is true in the stern section actually as well. So I was pretty vulnerable to that, reversing in towards that Bourgogne using all my guns. Typically, if you're using all of your guns, there's some exceptions, but typically if you're using all of your guns at close range, you're susceptible to this. It's not just Yamato, although Yamato is obviously the best example. That hull is so bad these days at close range. But a lot of other ships can actually be vulnerable to that too. And the reason why AP shells, I call it black hole armor, is that sure, you might get through this, but are you getting all the way through this next plate of 50 millimeters? And if you get through that yet too, are you getting through this next plate of 50 millimeters, right? You got 350 plus another 50 plus another 50. That's a lot of armor to get through. Suddenly we're starting to feel like Kremlin levels of Citadel protection, except it's spaced. It's multiple pieces you got to get through. Auto bounce checks have to roll again and again, and you're not always going to get through that, even though this is a little bit above water. It's interesting. It's very, very interesting how you would think it's more vulnerable. It's not angled enough to function like proper German turtleback. Like we'll go over to GK here. Look at how much more angled this is. It's a lot steeper to bounce the shells up is the idea. It's very interesting how that works in this game. If I hadn't played so much Bourgogne and Repub as well for that matter, or fought against them, I would have said these are much, much more vulnerable. If this ship was coming into the game just now, I'd be like, 'There's no way they're going to be able to hold their own against this. But if I hadn't played so much Bourgogne and Repub as well for that matter, or fought against them, I would have said these are much, much more vulnerable. If this ship was coming into the game just now, I'd be like, The turtleback doesn't matter. It's like the Japanese turtleback on something like an Amagi, for example. Sure, sometimes it might help, but it's not going to do enough to actually bounce the shells away from the Citadel. You will get Citadel, but it's really hard to Citadel these French battleships, and that is a benefit when playing it. A little frustrated to go against it, perhaps, but this ship is just so fun, I gotta say. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's going to do it for today's video on the Bourgogne. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.